are now in section 5, the partners and suppliers dimension for the ITAM practice. The exam syllabus includes understanding the role of partners and suppliers in this practice, particularly explain the dependencies of the practice on third parties and explain how partners and suppliers can support the practice. To begin with this, partners and suppliers may support the development, management, and execution of the IT asset management practice, and we'll take a deeper look at how that occurs. Now, we should know that a successful ITAM practice will not depend only on internal resources of an organization. In fact, many organizations depend on and handle many IT assets provided as part of third-party services. That's what we see here. And these IT assets are used by their consumers. Therefore, that is an important point, and that's why organizations get into service relationships with partners and suppliers. So the service relationship defines how much IT asset information is shared between them and their collaboration between them. The closer the relationships and higher the trust, the more IT asset information can be shared and management activities can be performed together. And the timely sourcing of IT assets and similar dependencies should be reflected in the service level agreements and the procedures. And also the third party should adjust their service level to the organization needs where possible. These are some of the key concepts related to dependencies on third parties. Now, assets that are acquired and provided by the organization's ITAM practice are frequently a complex mix of hardware, software, and cloud assets sourced through the elements of integration. We need to understand that the service relationships between the organization and their suppliers and partners introduce several constraints and dependencies, which will also create opportunities and supporting arrangements. Further, whenever the service relationship introduce constraints and dependencies, when an IT asset is supplied by a third party, the level of service time required for fulfillment, convenience, the frequency of communication, etc., may be constrained by the supplier's policies and operating procedures. And this can conflict with the user expectations and challenging to change or even influence. And when the IT assets are provided directly by the service provider and not by the third party, then there may be constraint from the third party for the components of the IT assets rather than the entire IT asset itself. So these are some of the challenges that an organization may face in this practice, due to which they depend on the third parties. And the timely sourcing of IT assets, if that is impacted, it can have severe consequences for many organizations. So all these should be reflected in the service level agreements and procedures. And the reason we say that the communications with customers and users should be routine and transparent, because that will establish realistic expectations and smoother request fulfillment. Therefore, even the supplier management practice should be brought in wherever possible so that the third parties can adjust their level of service to the needs of the organization. So what we are seeing so far is that outsourced ITAM services do exist and they are definitely helpful, but the ultimate responsibility for the organization's IT assets cannot be outsourced. It will remain with the organization. And therefore, the organization should develop internal competencies and controls to protect its own interests and master its own contractual and legal responsibilities. When the relationships are basic or cooperative, and the suppliers or partners are independent organizations with their own objectives, then the organization should take steps to protect its IT assets and remain in control. And the following steps are recommended. First, sign the non-disclosure agreements and carefully control the exchange of sensitive IT asset data with suppliers and partners. Second, discover any conflicts of interest that may cause harm to the organization. For example, it could be a service desk that charges for its services based on the number of assets it's provided to users. Or it could be a software compliance consulting mission entrusted to a supplier who is also a reseller or auditor on behalf of a software publisher. So the conflict of interest should be avoided. Then the third sub-bullet here is clarifying the supplier responsibilities in the contract for each item activity, meaning including the terms in third-party service contracts about the handling of IT assets with clear duties and responsibilities for each and every item activity that the supplier contributes to is important. Such as, it could be an outsourced service desk handling activities like the receiving of ordered IT assets, secure storage of them, stock management, allocation or the IMAC activities, that is, and then detection and handling of special situations such as damage, non-compliance, loss, and then also inventory activities and so on. Then lastly, we have this communicating achievements of mature item practice in order to enhance relationships. Such communication can improve the relationships between the organization and its vendors and suppliers. For example, understanding license model and a good software compliance can discourage time-consuming vendor audits. Also, controlling the IT spending can refocus collaboration with suppliers on high value-added topics or increase the investor and customer confidence. And operational activities that are free of administrative hassles can help attract talent and reduce service provider rates and so on. So there's quite a lot to know regarding the dependencies on the third parties in this practice. There are also some other things to be known here. What kind of support can be made available from third parties apart from what we saw earlier, such as provisioning of IT assets itself? The partners and suppliers may even provide software tools. In fact, many software tools used for the item practice are shared with other practices. But the implementation and the use of such integrated service management information systems often begins with automating the service request management. And also incident management and the service desk activities. So here the tool requirement should be defined by the IT asset management practice owner in collaboration with other team managers involved in this practice before the tools are procured, implemented, and used. Secondly, the teams from other practices that I just mentioned earlier should also be involved for the optimal procurement, implementation, and the usage of those tools. Then lastly, we have another area where the suppliers, third parties can support this practice, and that is where specialized suppliers who have developed expertise in IT asset management, they can help to establish and develop the practice and to develop the IT asset lifecycle models, methods, and techniques such as automation.